Hello, Education 2220 students. I hope everyone's having a great week. So, I wanted to jump on here and kind of go over an overview of Module 3. So, I first wanted to start with our course schedule, which is included in the course syllabus. So, if you look here, we are in Module 3, and this module is going to be a 2-week module, which means you will have 2 weeks to complete the activities. And the reason being is there are two chapters and it's kind of heavy. It's going to be going over the different categories of disability, defining them, as well as what's high incidence disabilities and low incidence. So it's quite a lot of material. So therefore, we will kind of put it into 2 weeks to complete that. So, jumping on into Module 3, you are going to be reading two chapters. You will read chapters 4 and 5 from Teaching in Today's Inclusive Classrooms. Now, as you see here in the overview, chapter 4 is really going to focus on students with high incidence disabilities. So, what do we mean by high incidence? So, this means students who may have intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, language impairments, autism spectrum disorder is on there, emotional disturbance. This even includes ADHD as well. So these are the students who are frequently served in either gen ed settings or even in student resource rooms. Now, chapter 5 is going to concentrate on low incidence disabilities. Now, these would be less common. So, these would be disabilities such as sensory impairments, deaf blindness, deaf, specifically be visually impaired, any kind of physical and health disabilities. This also would include traumatic brain injury. So these are more specialized supports and services inside their IEPs, or if they're early childhood, it would be their IFSP. So throughout these two chapters in this module, you're really going to begin to understand the different disabilities within those two categories of high incidence and low. And this is really going to help you determine not only what the appropriate placement is, going back to least restrictive environment, but also thinking about how can I design a learning environment that is inclusive and it's following that universal design for learning principles, right? And tying in those evidence-based strategies. Now, we will be looking at your assignment this week of using those evidence-based strategies and putting them in practices by called teaching strategies that would align and what would be best depending on that category of high incidence or low incidence. Now, here are our course outcomes this week and our learning objectives that we will be able to master when we're done with this module. Now, here's some key terms and concepts. I kind of defined a little bit for you of what high incidence disabilities were. Again, it's those you see frequently encountered in the gen ed classrooms, and then you have those low incidence, which are less common. But I kind of went ahead and separated them for you so you can kind of have a snippet of, okay, these are how I'm going to categorize these different exceptionalities or disabilities. And I went ahead and put in UDL because I wanted you to know that when we're completing our assignments and reading through the chapters, we want to look at a framework that makes sense. We draw in UDL because it is a proactive approach when we're talking about designing an environment or just inclusive instruction for those learners. We again look at different kinds of strategies or practices that are inclusive, such as like collaborative teaching models, assistive technology, maybe they need behavior management strategies, um, differentiated instruction as well. And then we start focusing on assessment and eligibility. So we focused a lot on that specifically last week when we were in Module 2 about the special ed process and how we determined if the child was going to receive services. We talked about the pre-intervention model such as RTI, and then if they didn't meet the guidelines and didn't receive services, then they had those accommodations. But we want to look specifically at those who are receiving services and have an IEP. So let's look at assessment and eligibility, right? What are those functional and academic characteristics that you're seeing in these students? Look at their formal and informal assessments. Look at the IEP development and the team and the goals they set. And then lastly, we look at instructional strategies, right? So, what are those instructional strategies that are supported for that student, regardless if this is common or less common? So, evidence based strategies, co teaching and peer support, accommodations and modifications, and then those culturally responsive teaching strategies as well. So, those are really the main concepts you're going to be taking away from this module. Now, as I mentioned, your required reading, you will be reading chapters 4 and 5. I put that in here. These chapters really are going to give you that foundational knowledge and understanding of the two different categories. So, you will have the chapter 4 and chapter 5 PowerPoint slides that go along with the text teaching in today's inclusive classrooms. Now, as far as your activities and assessments, how am I going to assess you this week? So, you will have your Module 3 quiz, and then you will be completing another IRIS module. Now, this IRIS module, again, is like a professional development. This one is specifically on autism, right? So, you're going to have a link here when you click in it, and it's going to take you to the IRIS module. Now, after you finish the module, you're going to complete what we call the assessment. So, you will click on the assessment tab within the IRIS module. This assessment is going to provide you an opportunity to really understand the content within the module and the professional development that you just completed. Now remember, you do not submit this. This is one of those activities that we talked about is a guide for you. It is a chance for you to use as a study tool for not only Module 3 quiz, but also in our midterm exam. So that's one of the assessments that you will be completing. What will you actually be turning in? So there's an activity I have here called Disability Detective, and you will see that this is not going to be due until September 28th because this is a 2-week module. The same goes for your Module 3 quiz. Okay. Even though it's Module 3 quiz, it's going to have 2 chapters worth of information, so it might be a little larger than our other 2 quizzes we've had prior. Okay, so again, I would get through a lot of the module before I attempted to take it, but again, it is there for you to take more than one attempt, and I will take the highest score. So take advantage of that. The disability detective, I wanted to take a moment and go over what I'm expecting you to do as far as this assessment. Okay, so there are 3 parts to this activity, and you will see that I went ahead and broke down how many points will be for each part. So, what you're going to do in this activity is you're going to demonstrate your ability of really identify what is a high incidence and low incidence. You're going to be able to really outline the learning and behavior characteristics of those two categories and disabilities. And then we're going to be able to match the disability with the effective teaching strategy for that student. And then we're going to apply this with our course outcomes by completing what we call a reflection piece. Okay, so let's go through each part. So, part 1 is classification. In this table, you have a list of disabilities. You're going to place each category by writing high incidence or low incidence. So you would put HI next to it in the second column, or if it's high incidence, or LI if it's a low incidence disability. Now in part 2, this is worth 20 points. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose 2 high incidence and 2 low incidence disabilities from part 1. Okay, so 2 from here or from the textbook. And you're going to identify what those key learning characteristics are and behavioral characteristics. Okay, so you're going to make sure I put an example here for you. So let's say one of them I chose was specific learning disability. You're going to look at and name those learning characteristics. Again, if you're not familiar, go back to the textbook and look at that specific learning disabilities. You can also go on the Tennessee Department of Education under special education. And again, like I showed us last time, you have that as a resource where it's going to, if you click on evaluations and eligibility, it's going to have all the 16 categories that Tennessee State Department accepts. So you could see specific learning disability in there, and it's going to talk all about that. So we'll define it. You have the characteristics, which you're going to list. So we broke it down when we say characteristics. I want you to list both the learning characteristics as well as the behavioral. And I gave you an example to show you. But remember, you have a total of 4 to complete in this table. You're going to do 2 high and then list 2 low. And then lastly, for your part three, that's that reflection component we talked about. I want you to write a short paragraph answering these two questions, right? And whenever we're doing reflection, we always want to think about how we tie it into our teaching practice as a future educator, right? So the first question asks you, why do you think it's important for teachers to understand the differences in the incidence categories? And then how knowing the characteristics and strategies for each of those categories will influence your teaching practice. Okay, and I want you to reflect on that, and that's worth 10 points. So altogether, this assignment is going to be worth 40 points. Okay. So just make sure that you complete that and submit it to Dropbox. All right. As always, if you have any questions about this module, please feel free to reach out. Like I said, you do have 2 weeks to complete this. All right. Until next time, take care.